So you might be asking, why build a steam engine? That's not what your girlfriend meant by "you're weak." Why don't you just acknowledge your inattentiveness and move on? 2. I present to you Operation Wooshy Wooshy Thing. Get it? Because it goes woo. The steam engine is made out of 4 major components: the piston, the valve, the flywheel, and the boiler. Let's start with the piston. Transition. Woo. So, the piston assembly is fairly simple. You pretty much have just a tube closed off on both ends with holes drilled into it, and then you have a disc attached to a shaft that's able to freely slide within the tube. There are 2 major different types of steam engines. There's a dual action and a single action. A dual action is going to work like this. You have 2 ports on either side of the engine, and both sides of the tube are closed off. The hot compressed steam is going to go in this side of the tube and push the piston to the other side of the tube, while the air on this side of the piston is going to be pushed out of this hole. Now it's called dual action because while the piston is over here, hot air is going to be fed on this side of the tube and push the piston all the way to the other side of the tube, while the air on the opposite side of the tube is pushed out of this hole. Whereas a single action, you have just hot air acting on one side of the piston, and then the flywheel is what brings the piston back and pushes that air out. So with the dual action, you're getting power with both strokes, and with the single action, you're only getting power with one stroke, and then you have all this wasted potential. In simple terms, for good engine, air go this hole, push metal that way. Air go that hole, push metal this way. For bad engine, air go this hole, push metal that way, but metal push metal back this way. So now that you have a general idea of how it works, let's start with the materials. I'm using this 1 inch by 1 foot pre-threaded galvanized steel pipe for the cylinder walls, and these 1 inch pre-threaded pipe caps to seal the ends. I stopped recording here because I was getting some weird looks from the employees, and on top of that, the fact that all the materials that I was getting looked suspiciously like the materials needed to build a pipe bomb. Instead, I'll just show you the materials from the checkout screen. I'm using some 1/2 inch round rod for the main piston shaft, which didn't turn out as expected, but I'll explain later. I'm using the 7/16 drill bit to drill the holes that will later be tapped to accept these threaded adapters for the intake and exhaust ports. And last but not least, I'm using a stack of 1 1/8 washers as the piston head, which, if you noticed, are too big to fit in the cylinder. Man, that's gonna look so good in post-production. Now, there's a little problem. Steam engines are usually made with high-precision lathes or CNC machines, and I don't have a lathe or a CNC machine. What I could do, and what many other people on YouTube have done, is use a car shock or a syringe as the piston, which already forms a perfect seal, but that makes way too much sense, and we don't like that here. We love suffering. We love suffering. So instead, I sandwiched the washer between a few nuts on a threaded rod. I attached the whole thing on a drill and shaved down the outer diameter using a bench grinder strategically placed near highly flammable materials. Then I take the washer stack off and attempt to drill a 1/2 inch hole through the washer without a vise so they can fit on a 1/2 inch round rod shaft, before realizing that it's hard to drill holes without a vise and I have no way of fastening it to the shaft. Let's roll that back. Man, I'm getting really good at this. Instead of making the shaft out of something that is way too strong for its application, I decided to keep the washers on the threaded rod and use the threaded rod as the new piston shaft. This way I can use the existing holes in the washers. Now that I have some new washers, insert cool building montage. Everything is going smoothly as planned, but the threaded rod is grinding down at the hole at the end of the cap. I bought some 1/4-inch round rod that I can thread on just the end for the nuts and washers, which allows for the rest of the rod to smoothly glide through the hole with minimal friction. After doing some crude testing, the piston assembly is complete. Now that we have a way to harness the pressurized steam, we need a way to direct the pressurized steam to either side of the piston. Enter the valve assembly. Get out of here. The valve assembly is constructed similarly to the piston assembly. You have your cylinder, you have some holes, and you have 2 pistons instead of 1. The purpose of the valve assembly is to divert the high pressure steam from its source to one of the 2 ports in the valve assembly that delivers the steam to one of 2 ports on the piston assembly. As the pistons oscillate, the high pressure steam is diverted to only one of the holes on the valve assembly, which goes to its corresponding hole on the piston assembly. As the piston moves back, that high pressure steam is now directed to the opposite hole on the valve assembly, which corresponds to the opposite hole on the piston assembly. Now the exhaust from the piston assembly goes to the ports on the exhaust of the valve assembly, which shoots out of the sides going into the atmosphere. In simple terms, metal move, air go in here, air come out there, metal move back, air go in there, air come out here. Pretty cool, right? I'll be using the same washer on threaded rod method to create the valve pistons. However, I can't screw the threaded adapters into the valve assembly like I did the piston assembly because the valve pistons need to be able to freely slide over the intake and exhaust ports. The solution is to barely thread the adapters into the valve body and lather it with JB Weld to keep it in place and prevent any steam leakages. With that said, cool build montage number 2. Now that the valve is built, it's time to test the valve and piston together. I cut and bent 1/4-inch copper tubing off camera, then took it to the air compressor to test it out. Now that we have a piston that creates movement from steam, and a valve that needs movement to divert the steam, we need something to get the thing that the flywheel assembly. The flywheel assembly is made out of 3 major components: the crankshaft, and the other 2 that we don't care about right now because I just remembered that I have to build the thing that the crankshaft rides on. I'll make this fast. I started by building the main frame out of some wood, then attached the piston and valve to the wood using some pipe strap hanger thingies. Then drilled some holes into some wood, pressed the bearings into the holes, and mounted the wood onto the other wood. Okay, where were we? The flywheel assembly is made out of 3 major components: the crankshaft, the flywheel, and the arms. I'm going to call these the arms from now on because I don't know the technical name. The first 2 are simple. The crankshaft is a shaft that spins, and the flywheel is a weight that spins on the crankshaft. Something about inertia. The arm is responsible for converting the linear motion of the piston to the rotational motion of the flywheel. There's also the arm on the other side, which is responsible for converting the rotational motion of the flywheel to the linear motion of the valves. However, there will need to be a connecting rod connecting the arms to the shafts with joints on either end so that it can rotate freely without buckling. The length of the arms determines the travel distance of the pistons and valves. If I want the piston or valve to travel this amount of distance, I need to make the arms half that length. This is because the arm has access to 360 degrees of rotation, so you have to account for the total horizontal displacement of the end of the arm instead of just the length of the arm. In simple terms, long metal slidey go push on spinny, spinny go push on long metal no slidey. Build montage number 3 or something. Yeah. Yep.
Alright. How are you doing?
Good. How about you? The idea is that if I need to shorten these, I can just twist them in, line it up, reconnect it with the connecting rod that I still need to make. There's enough clearance for it to rotate freely, so that's good. Even though it looks like crap, it should work. Hopefully. We'll see maybe today, this afternoon. For y'all, it's in like 2 minutes. I proceeded to mount the arm and connecting rod with a few paper clips and hopes and prayers in preparation for its first official test. Okay, this is test number 1, compressed air with the steam engine and no flywheel. So it works, but it's really inefficient. Adding the flywheel should fix this, but I wanted to test the position of the valve relative to the position of the piston arm to ensure that the valve timing was correct, and that the engine wasn't working against itself. Alright, so keep in mind, nothing is tightened down right now, and I think those paper clips are temporary, but they might actually work on the final one. In preparation for mounting the flywheel onto the crankshaft, I made this crappy adapter out of wood which didn't hold up very well, so I decided to cheat a little and make one that can be 3D printed so I can press fit it onto the flywheel. I only press fit? Well, I didn't really want to use any fasteners to secure the flywheel to the crankshaft because I'm using a weight plate and it's not mine. I borrowed it from my neighbor's yard and have no intention, I have every intention of returning it back to him. Yeah. So I whipped out my lightly seasoned printer and got to work. Alright, steam engine test number 2, this time with the addition of a flywheel, so. The results were a little underwhelming, and I quickly found out that too much air was leaking past the valve pistons. With no time to waste, I disconnected the connecting rod from the valve pistons and removed the pistons from the cylinder. It took a little bit of experimenting, but I found that wrapping the pistons in Teflon tape provided a decent seal, so I put everything back together and went back to testing. Okay, test 3. PTFE tape hopefully provides some sort of seal to better divert the air. Cool. Despite saying one word, I was pleased with the results. The steam engine was finally complete. I can finally ditch the project and move on to something else. Oh, I forgot the boiler. Oh.